The town of Willow Ridge was known for its stillness, the kind of quiet that settled in your bones like an old song. On the edge of town stood a little bookstore tucked between a coffee shop and a florist, its painted sign weathered but charming. Chapters and Chances. Every Thursday morning at precisely 10 a.m., the little brass bell above the door jingled to signal the arrival of Lena Callahan. Arms usually full of new stock from the downtown distributor, her dark curls always in. A loose braid, she smelled faintly of jasmine and ink. Lena had grown up in Willow Ridge, inheriting the bookstore after her grandmother passed. She loved stories, how they healed, transformed, and held pieces of people who no longer existed. That Thursday morning, however, someone unexpected walked through the bookstore. Door first thought Elias Hart didn't belong in Willow Ridge. At least that's what he believed. A documentary filmmaker on forced sabbatical after a creative burnout, he came to the small town only because his sister insisted he needed stillness and nonfiction. He was tall, with a perpetual furrow between his brows and the kind of expression that made people instinctively speak quieter around him. He didn't expect the bookstore, and certainly didn't expect the girl who looked like poetry in motion. Lena almost dropped her coffee when she saw him. She blinked twice as if unsure whether he was a real person or a character from one of her favorite novels. "Hi," he said, brushing snow from his coat. "Do you have anything?" Quiet. Her lips quirked. Quiet? I mean, not murder. Or a dystopia. Or ... dragons. Something that doesn't set fire to the world. Lena chuckled, a sound soft like turning. "Pages. You're in luck. I specialize in books that heal." He glanced around. The cozy shop felt like it had exhaled stories for decades, wooden shelves that creaked. A Persian rug worn from years of footsteps. The scent of lavender candles blending with old paper. "I'm Elias," he offered, looking mildly apologetic. "For being human and new." "Lena," she replied, tilting her head. "I'm not." He smirked. "That obvious?" She handed him a novel with a pale blue cover. "Try this." It's about someone who forgets who they are, only to find themselves in a town full of people who remember them better than they do. Elias blinked. Sounds ... on the nose. Sometimes life imitates fiction. He took the book, their fingers brushing briefly. A jolt not quite electric, but noticeable passed between them. The next day, Elias returned. "This book made me cry on page 82, he confessed, placing it on the counter. "I didn't know I could still cry from words." Lena smiled. "You're healing. That's what books do." He tilted his head. "And what do you do?" "I give people what they didn't know they needed," she said. Matter ... fact ... a pause. "You ever thought about writing your own story?" he asked, genuinely curious. She blinked at him, caught off guard. "I used to, long ago." "You should start again," Elias said, his voice soft. Ernest thought it was the beginning of something neither of them fully understood, but both could feel it. That weekend, Lena found herself baking muffins for no one in particular and rearranging the poetry section, just in case Elias dropped by again. And he did, this time with 2 coffees, one for him. "One for her. I remembered you said you like cinnamon," he explained as he handed it over, avoiding her eyes. Lena laughed. "Careful, Elias Hart. You're becoming someone people look forward to." He didn't respond right away. Just stood there, holding his coffee like a shield. Then, in a voice almost too quiet, he said, "That's new for me." She studied him, then his guarded expression, the tired in his shoulders, the unspoken stories between his words, and something inside her whispered, "You'll love him before he loves himself." Elias Hart had never stayed in one place for too long. His work demanded movement city to city, project to project, always chasing moments to capture through his lens. He built a reputation as the man who told hard truths through soft visuals, stories of war veterans, displaced children, forgotten communities. But over time, something had broken. Not with the camera, but within him. He could tell others stories, but somewhere along the way, he lost the thread of his own. His sister Nora called it compassion fatigue. She was the one who found the little cabin outside Willow Ridge, tucked into the trees like it belonged there. She stocked it with groceries, threw in a few old records, and insisted he take at least 3 months off. It's quiet, she'd sighed. You need quiet. Elias hated stillness. It meant listening to his thoughts until the bookstore, until Lena Callahan had lived in Willow Ridge her whole life. She'd watch people arrive and leave like seasoned, some with promises to return, others with nothing but a goodbye. But she'd stayed. Her grandmother, Moira, had built Chapters and Chances from the ground up 50 years ago, and Lena had grown up between the pages. It wasn't just a bookstore, it was a place where hearts mended, where people lingered on the poetry shelf when life got too loud. Lena had her own routine. Wake early, feed her cat Gatsby, light a candle in the shop, and place the quote of the day on the front chalkboard. Customers often stopped just to read it. She believed in stories, the way some believed in fate, but Lena hadn't written anything in years, not since her parents' accident. The grief had quieted her voice, and in that silence, she'd buried the part of herself that once dreamed of becoming an author. Instead, she poured love into the bookstore until Elias. Over the following weeks, Elias became a familiar presence. Sometimes he browsed. Sometimes he read quietly in the armchair by the fireplace. Other times he just sat there, coffee in hand, and watched the snow fall through the front window. Lena started saving new arrivals for him. Thought you might like this, she'd say, sliding a novel across the counter. He'd smile small. Crooked. You're oddly good at knowing what I need. Occupational hazard. She teased. What began as casual visits soon turned into quiet rituals. One Sunday afternoon, Elias helped Lena hang fairy lights around the front window. Even invented these things? He muttered, untangling the mess. Lena grinned. Someone with more optimism than wiring skills. As they worked, their fingers brushed more than once, and each time, Elias glanced at her like he didn't know how to process the warmth. Afterwards, they sat on the floor, sipping hot chocolate. Can I ask you something personal? Lena said. He nodded. Why Willow Ridge? Why now? Elias hesitated. Then I burned out, lost the will to create. My sister said this town might remind me how to feel again, and has it? His eyes found hers. I think it has. She looked away, cheeks flushing. Meanwhile, Lena's world outside the bookstore was simple. She volunteered at the town library, baked 2 mini blueberry scones, and hosted a weekly book club for high school students who didn't quite fit anywhere else. One Thursday, Elias tagged along to the book club. Quiet at first, he slowly began to open up when one teen asked, Do you think people can be broken forever? Elias stared at the boy for a long moment before answering. No, he said, but sometimes it takes someone else to remind. You're still whole. Lena's chest tightened, because without knowing it, he'd said exactly what she had once needed to hear. And now, she found herself wondering if maybe, just maybe, she was meant to be that person for him. Later that night, Lena sat on her back porch, wrapped in a knit blanket, journal in her lap. She hadn't written in years, but now, the words came quietly like Elias himself. He walks like he's carrying ghosts, but his eyes still search for light. She closed the journal, holding it to her chest. Elias, meanwhile, paced his cabin. He kept replaying that moment, Lena in the bookstore, laughing as she arranged a stack of poetry books. The way her eyes sparkled when she recommended something. The way her presence made everything quieter. He didn't know what it meant, but for the first time in years, he wanted to stay, not because he needed rest, but because he wanted to see what came next with her. The late January snow fell softly in Willow Ridge, cloaking the town in silence. The bookstore's windows were fogged with warmth as Lena adjusted a new display, stories to keep you warm. She hadn't expected Elias to come in that day. He usually visited in the mornings, but as she turned toward the door, there he was, wearing a navy wool coat, snowflakes caught in his lashes. He looked at her like the bookstore was his only destination. Afternoon, he said, his voice gentler now. You're late, Lena teased, brushing snow from his shoulders. I almost gave your reading chair away. I'll fight for it, he said, deadpan. Fair warning. They both laughed. The sound had become familiar between them, something warm and easy, like the space they'd carved in each other's days. That afternoon, Lena closed the shop early. Snow had blanketed the streets, and few dared to drive. As she locked up, Elias stood beside her, glancing at the darkened roads. I could walk you home, he offered. You don't have to. I know, he said, but I want to. The walk to her cottage was quiet at first, their boots crunching over the snow. The streetlights glowed golden, illuminating the gentle curve of her smile. How long do you plan to stay in Willow Ridge? She asked softly. Elias hesitated. Originally just a few weeks, now I'm not sure. She stopped walking. When he turned to look at her, she was watching him carefully. I hope you do. She said it was just a sentence, but the way she said it, it sounded like hope, like invitation, like something he didn't think he deserved. Inside Lena's warm cottage, the air smelled like cinnamon and firewood. Elias looked around, surprised. This feels like a home, he said. Lena smiled. Because it is. They sat on the floor near the fireplace, sharing leftover scones and talking for hours. He told her about his first documentary, about the man he met in a war camp who taught him how to find silence in chaos. She told him about losing her parents, how she'd stopped writing the moment she lost the people who believed she could. He looked at her then, not with pity, but understanding. You still write, don't you? He asked. She nodded. Late at night, when the grief is quiet. Will you let me read something someday? Maybe, she said, her voice soft. If you promise not to make a documentary out of it? I'd never, he whispered. The tension between them was unspoken, but tangible. They brushed hands while reaching for the same teacup. Their knees touched beneath the coffee table, and when Lena walked him to the door later that night, the air between them hung heavy with words neither of them dared speak yet. Good night, Elias. He hesitated, as if wanting to say something more, but he just nodded. Good night, Lena. The next day, he brought her flowers, not roses. He didn't think Lena was the roses type. He brought her wildflowers, bundled together with a simple twine, their colors bright against the winter gray. For the girl who makes books bloom, he said, awkwardly thrusting them into her hands. Lena stared at them, then up at him. That might be the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. He flushed. It wasn't meant to be romantic. She raised an eyebrow. Really? He opened his mouth. Close to, okay, maybe it was. They started spending every evening together, reading side by side, arguing over favorite characters, cooking simple dinners while Lena cooked. Elias mostly chopped things and tried not to set anything on fire. One night, she caught him filming the snowfall outside her window with his phone. What are you capturing? She asked. He looked at her, not at the snow, and said, a feeling. It wasn't all easy. Elias struggled with vulnerability. He'd mastered the art of listening, but wasn't used to being seen. Lena, on the other hand, had walls built from silence and politeness. But together, they were learning to soften. When she touched his wrist during a book debate, Neither moved away when he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear as she read aloud. She didn't stop. Then came the piano. Lena had one in her living room, untouched since her father passed. One evening, after too much tea and laughter, Elias sat on the bench. "You play?" she asked. He shrugged. "A little." The first few notes were clumsy, then smoother. A melody emerged, slow and sorrowful. Lena watched him, surprised. "You're full of secrets." "So are you." She sat beside him, their shoulders brushed, and that night, in the quiet hum of music and flickering firelight, they both felt it. Something had changed, not just in the room, but in them. Days passed. February neared. One evening, as they closed the shop together, Elias looked at her and said, "I haven't filmed anything since I arrived here. But now I want to." Lena turned to him. "What changed?" "You," he said softly. "You reminded me what beauty looks like when it's quiet." That night, Lena dreamt of sunlight and steady hands, of being loved not for her strength, but for her softness. When she woke up, she reached for her journal. "He is the sound of coming home. And I didn't even know I was lost." February arrived gently, bringing softer snow and longer days. In Willow Ridge, time seemed to stretch, like taffy, slow and sweet. For Elias and Lena, the days blurred into something deeper than routine. Something sacred. Their love hadn't been declared in words. Not yet. But it lived in the pauses between laughter. In the way he poured her tea, without asking. And how she folded a scarf he left behind and kept it near her window, like a quiet promise. One Friday morning, Lena came down with the flu. The bookstore stayed closed for the first time in months. Elias found out when she didn't reply to his usual morning text, just a sleepy emoji with a single word. "Oh." He showed up at her door 10 minutes later. "You're not allowed to be sick," he announced, holding up a paper bag filled with soup, tissues, and tea. She opened the door slowly, wrapped in a thick blanket, her nose red and hair a mess. "You're not scared of germs?" "I'm more scared of not seeing you." Her smile was tired but real. "Come in." That day, Elias stayed by her side. He read to her soft, soothing words from her favorite childhood book. He made her laugh, even when it hurt. And when she dozed off on the couch, her head resting on his shoulder, Elias didn't move. Not for hours. Later, she murmured, "Why are you so good to me?" He looked down at her. "Because you make me want to be." Their bond deepened, not through grand declarations, but quiet consistency. They took long walks through town sometimes, saying very little. One snowy afternoon, Elias held her mittened hand and asked, "Do you think some people are meant to find each other?" Lena tilted her head. "I don't know if it's fate, but I think when two people grow in the same direction, they stay." He smiled. "Then I hope I'm growing the right way." That evening, Elias showed her the film footage he'd been quietly collecting since they met. Clips of snowfall through the bookstore windows, Lena laughing as she held up a book. A close-up of her hands tying twine around wildflowers. "It's not for anyone else," he said, his voice quiet. "It's for me, to remember what healing looks like." Lena's eyes glistened. "You see things most people miss." "That's because you slow the world down for me." Valentine's Day arrived with little fanfare in Willow Ridge. But Elias had a plan. He asked Lena to meet him at the bookstore after sunset. When she arrived, the windows were glowing. Inside, candles flickered on every shelf. The quote of the day read, "Some stories don't need to be written to be remembered. Some love lives in silence and soft light." Elias stood near the poetry section, holding a single white peony. "You," he said, handing it over, "because it's rare, like you." Lena blinked away tears. "I didn't think you were a romantic," she whispered. "I didn't think I was either." "Until you." That night, they danced slowly in the bookstore's quiet glow. No music. Just the sound of their breathing. Hearts aligned. She leaned into his chest, and he pressed a kiss to her forehead, gentle, reverent, as if thanking the universe. For her. After that, love found its voice between them. One morning, as she made pancakes in her kitchen, he wrapped his arms around her from behind and said it for the first time. I love you. She froze, spatula mid-air. He turned her gently to face him. I'm not asking anything from you. I just needed you to know. Lena looked up, tears welling. Elias, I've loved you since you were just a stranger who looked like he'd forgotten how to dream. He kissed her, then slow, deep, a blend of past pain and present healing. Later that week, they visited the bookstore early before it opened. Lena brought him to a shelf in the very back. One she rarely touched. It held journals, hers. She pulled out one and placed it in his hands. My story. The one I stopped writing. Elias opened the first page. Her handwriting curled like ivy across the paper. Are you sure? He asked. She nodded. It's time someone read it. He sat there for hours, flipping page after page as sunlight painted golden trails across the wooden floor. When he closed the final page, his voice broke. You're a storyteller. She swallowed. I was, until the grief silenced me. He shook his head, gently touching her cheek. No, it didn't silence you. It made your voice more real. They spent that night wrapped in blankets under the stars, talking about dreams. I want to write again, Lena said. Really write? You, well, and you, she asked, turning to him. Will you stay? He looked at her for a long time. I don't want to keep chasing broken stories. I want to build something whole. He took her hand, and I want to start here, with you. In the weeks that followed, their love became a rhythm. Quiet mornings, handwritten notes, cups of coffee waiting on the counter. They didn't rush anything. They were both healing. But now, they were healing together. The first sign of change came quietly. Elias received a call late, one evening as he and Lena were folding used bookmarks into donation boxes. He excused himself with a faint smile. Just a work thing. But when he returned, his eyes were shadowed. Lena didn't ask at first. She'd learned that sometimes the heart needs silence to process. A few days passed, then came the second call, and the third. Elias became restless. He stayed up later, pacing, staring at his phone. His camera reappeared perched on the counter like a ghost from his past. One morning, Lena found him filming the frost patterns on her window. They offered me a project, he said, not looking up. A feature-length documentary. Global release. It's single quotes, the kind of thing I used to dream about. She tried to smile. That's amazing. But he turned to her, conflict in his eyes. It's in Jordan. War-torn border towns. 6 months, maybe more. The silence between them felt like winter air, sharp and cold. Lena looked down at her hands. And you want to go? I don't know, he said, voice low. I thought I was done. But this story matters, and we don't. Her words escaped before she could soften them. Elias stepped forward. That's not what I said. But it's what it feels like. They didn't argue in loud voices. Their conflict unfolded in quiet distance. He left earlier from the bookstore. She stopped texting him. Good night. Their conversations became surface level, both terrified of saying the wrong thing, or maybe the right one. One night, Lena sat in the bookstore long after closing, reading the first journal she'd ever written, the one from after her parents died. She'd written, people leave, and I am the one who stays. And now it was happening again. Elias, meanwhile, stood alone in his cabin, staring at the plane ticket confirmation email in his inbox, still unsent. He thought about Lena's laugh, her journals, her slow, steady love. He also thought about the war victims in the brief sent to him, faces blurred by trauma, children sleeping on dirt floors. Can I walk away from this story? He whispered to himself, but deep down, a crueler question echoed louder. Can I ask her to wait again? They met for coffee the next morning. It felt like the first time again, but not in a sweet way. In a way that reminded them how fragile love is when it's held in trembling hands. Lena stirred her tea slowly. Elias broke the silence. I haven't accepted yet, but you will. He looked at her, pain in his gaze. It's what I do. It's who I was before you. And who are you now? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. He hesitated. Someone torn in half. Lena blinked back tears. Then maybe you should go. Figure out who you want to be. He reached across the table, but she gently pulled her hand away. I love you, Elias, but I won't be the place you run from. I want to be the place you run to. That night, they sat on the floor of the bookstore together, yet not. No touching. No. Declarations. Just silence. At one point, Elias said, what if this is goodbye? Lena swallowed hard. Then I hope you remember that someone once believed in you before you even believed in yourself. The next morning, he was gone. No. Message. Just absence. Days passed. Then weeks. Lena kept the bookstore running, but something had dimmed in her. She still offered stories to customers, still lit candles, still posted her daily quotes, but her heart beat in slow, fractured rhythms. Sometimes she thought she heard the bell chime at the door and turned too quickly, but it was never him. Evening, as the spring thaw began, she found a letter tucked inside her favorite book, The Alchemist, in the bookstore's poetry section. It was his handwriting. Lena, you loved me before I knew how to love myself. Before I remembered what it meant to feel steady, safe. SAE, and I laughed because I thought purpose meant sacrifice. But what I've learned is this. Purpose without love is just noise. And your love quieted me in the best way. I'm coming back. If you'll have me. If you still believe that second chances exist. Elena clutched the letter to her chest. And for the first time in weeks, she cried not from pain, but from hope. It was the first warm day of spring when Elias' heart returned to Willow Ridge. The town looked the same, quiet streets, children riding bikes, daffodils blooming near storefronts, but everything inside him had changed. He stood outside Chapters and Chances, unsure if he should go in. Would she forgive him? Had he broken something beyond repair? Inside the bookstore, Lena stood behind the counter, rearranging a display. The usual warmth in her eyes had dulled. She still smiled for customers, still made tea for the regulars, but the ache hadn't left. She'd read his letter a dozen times since finding it. She kept it tucked in the back of her journal, the paper now soft at the edges from being unfolded and refolded so often. Still, she hadn't met him back. She wasn't sure if she could go through it. Again, not if he was going to leave. The bell above the door jingled. She looked. Up. And froze. Elias. His coat slung over one shoulder. Camera bag across his chest. Wildflowers in his hand, bright, clumsy, and heartfelt. Their eyes met. And for a long moment, neither moved. Then, slowly, Lena stepped out from behind the counter. She said nothing, just stared at him like he was a memory returned in full color. He cleared his throat, his voice shaky. I didn't get on the plane. Her heart stuttered. I drove for 2 days. I kept thinking. I could tell other people's stories, or I could finally write mine. He took a step closer, and I want that story to be with you. Lena's arms were folded tightly across her chest. You didn't say goodbye. I couldn't, he admitted. Because if I said goodbye, I might not have had the courage to come back. A pause. You hurt me, she whispered. I know, he said, eyes glassy, and I'm sorry. I thought I had to choose between purpose and love, but I was wrong. Love is the purpose. He handed her the flowers. She didn't take them at first. Instead, she asked, why now? Why come back? Elias drew a deep breath. Because everywhere I go, I look for you. In every story, every face, every sky. And I realized home isn't a place I need to find. It's a person. He looked at her, voice breaking, and that person is you. Tears slipped down Lena's cheeks. She wanted to speak, but her throat burned with too many unsaid things, so instead, she stepped forward and placed her hand on his chest right over his heart. Do you mean it? She whispered. Elias covered her hand with his, with everything I am. They stood like that for a long moment, breathing each other in, hearts sinking. Then, gently, Lena leaned her forehead against his. I was afraid to love someone who might leave, she said softly. I was afraid to stay and not be enough. Their eyes met again, and in that look, they found what they'd both been missing. Courage. He kissed her then, not rushed, not desperate, but full of apology. Full of hope. Full of the kind of love that only comes when two broken pieces realize they were always meant to fit. Later that evening, they sat on the front steps of the bookstore, watching the sun dip behind the trees. Elias laced his fingers through hers. I've been thinking, he said. What if I filmed something different next? She looked at him, curious. Something quiet, something real. A story about a woman who gives people stories, and the man who forgot how to live until she reminded him. She smiled, eyes shining. Would you call it chapters and chances? He laughed. Only if you help me write the script. She rested her head on his shoulder, her heart finally at peace. I'd like that. 3 months later, Willow Ridge bloomed. Spring spilled into summer, painting the streets with golden light and blossoms. The bookstore windows overflowed with flowers, both real and paper crafted. Each one part of the new Letters to Summer exhibit Lena had dreamed up. Life had found a rhythm again, but this time, it beat for 2. Elias stayed, not for a week. Not until he figured things out. He stayed like roots. He built a tiny editing studio in the back room of the bookstore, where he worked quietly on a new film, a love letter to small towns, to healing, to Lena. He titled it, Before I Knew Myself. Every morning began the same. Lena opened the shop at 9. Elias brought coffee at 10. They wrote together, sometimes silently, sometimes trading paragraphs and laughter. On weekends, they hosted writing workshops for teens, started a little story swap corner, and once even organized a town-wide poetry walk. Willow Ridge buzzed with words and warmth. But the most beautiful story unfolded in the quiet between them. One evening, after closing up, Elias pulled Lena toward the poetry section. He held a worn hardcover in his hands. I've been saving this, he said. She smiled. A book? No, he whispered. A question. He opened the book slowly. Nestled between the pages was a delicate ring silver, engraved with a line from her favorite poem. You are my stillness in a world that spins. Tears filled her eyes. Elias. He got down on one knee, heart in his throat, eyes never leaving hers. I was lost when I met you. You didn't try to fix me. You just stayed. You believed in me before I believed in myself. I want to spend the rest of my life returning that gift. He took her hand. Will you marry me? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she knelt too, so they were eye to eye, and whispered, You were the plot twist I never saw coming, and the only ending I ever wanted. The town buzzed with joy in the weeks that followed. Their wedding was small held in the bookstore courtyard, under twinkling lights and hanging pages of their favorite books. Lena wore a dress her grandmother once sewed, and Elias wore a tie he admitted he hated but wore because she once said he looked mysteriously charming in it. They didn't exchange vows written by someone else. They read each other's journal entries from the week. They met. Not a single guest had dry eyes. As they danced their first dance, Lena looked up at him and whispered, You know, I once wrote that I was scared to love again. Elias kissed her forehead. And now? She smiled. Now I write stories where love always finds its way back. Their love wasn't perfect. Some days they argued about silly things, Elias forgetting to label the coffee jars, Lena buying too many secondhand books with nowhere to. Shelved them, but every night ended the same, with a journal shared. Between them, a page each, dot sometimes filled with dreams, dot sometimes with simple gratitude, dot sometimes with nothing more than, I'm glad we stayed. Years later, their story would become more than just theirs. Their film aired at a national storytelling festival. Lena's novel titled She Loved Me Before I Knew Myself became a quiet bestseller, praised for its depth, hope, and gentleness. But more than accolades or success, they cherished the life they built, a life of morning coffees, handwritten quotes, and love that healed quietly, faithfully. On their 10-year anniversary, Elias placed a new quote on the bookstore's chalkboard. Some stories change you, some save you, and some feel like coming home. And under it, he added, this one did all three.